Greetings all, Paladin here. Back to you again after a few weeks of hiatus working on some issues that needed my immediate attention, but I'm back. This video is probably not going to make me any friends, especially new friends, but if you hang around to the end, you'll probably get some good news. Before I get to that, I want to wrap up some outstanding items from our last video and the two Chucks. For the one in Spain, all you have to do is research his cryptocurrency, foreign currency, and metals connection, and also his partners. I think that'll give you the answer that you're looking for if you're still on the fence about him. Now, the other Chuck, he did a video a few weeks ago regarding, I think, Africa, and in that video he said he doesn't know who we are, doesn't know who I am, or doesn't know who the White Hats are. Well, then my question to him is, why do you have so many of your followers in our Discord taking information out to give to you to spin and then put out as your own?
I didn't even know who this Paladin character was.
You know, we've been doing our reports 10 years next month. We've exposed the banking cartel. We've exposed the Federal Reserve. We've exposed the Bush crime family, the Clinton crime family, the Vatican bank accounts with names and balances. We've talked about the 15T fraud in detail by the Fed that was committed in 2009. We've provided copies of the SWIFTs. We've provided copies of the underlying documents. So we've been at this quite a bit, quite a long time. We've also released copies of a trading program contract that was signed by Greenspan, and then a follow-up contract that was signed by Satoru, Biden, and Janet Yellen. So I think for Chuck to say that he never heard of us or he doesn't know who we are, then he has to admit that he needs to do his homework and read the scouting report. But that's one of the just many untruths that he spouts every time he opens his mouth. We were going to do a fact check on some of the many assertions he's made over the last few months, but decided against it as it would take up too much time. However, we do hope he's doing okay down there in Mexico, as in that Africa video he did about a month ago, it seems like the unit might be malfunctioning.
And my name is Charlie Freak. Here's why. Char is to burn to a crisp. And what am I burning to a crisp? Lie. Char lie. Char lie. Char lie is burning lies to a crisp. That's what I do. That's why we have literally been attacked here at our home in Mexico.
This video will be a fact check on him and others who endlessly promote the NESARA story. We first came across this several years ago and looked into it and dismissed it pretty quickly because it's another story that has, well, it actually started, I think, about 20 some years ago, and why it has made a comeback in recent weeks or months or years is beyond us. So let's get started on this. We'll get this finished. What does NESARA stand for? Well, it depends on who you listen to. If you go back and actually research the true story of NESARA, you'll see that a gentleman by the name of Harvey Bernard introduced the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, or at least tried to introduce it to Congress, but he could not find any sponsors, and this was back in 1990. So it failed, and he has written about that numerous times before his death, and I think in 2005. Then we have the National Economic Stabilization and Reformation Act, and I think this was penned by the Dove of Oneness, who we will talk about shortly. And then recently I heard someone call it the National Economic Stabilization and Reorganization Act. My God, this is just really totally unbelievable. But anyway, so let's get started here. The NESARA story, as it's told, has its roots and foundation based on the farm claims. And I'm not going to go into those in detail or just in general, But if you research the farm claims, you'll find that those are accurate. With that as its foundation or basis, then it morphs into the NESARA legislation being introduced into Congress, being passed by a few senators and congressmen, signed into law by Clinton, and supposedly taking effect on the morning of September 11th, 2001. Now, I want to show some examples of this story, this urban legend that's being passed around, and it's really hard to pick one or two sites because it seems like someone will start a thread or start a website or a page on their website, and they will talk about NESARA being real, and then they will provide links to other people's websites or web pages that basically state the same information, and they all use each other to seemingly confirm that NESARA is real because they're all talking about it, yet doesn't seem to be any new information. So in that regard, it was rather difficult to come up with one site or one source that has the full story. But I did find one that was written, a posting that was written in 2009 by one James Rink, who is a self-professed super soldier. So you can determine for yourself whether that's accurate or not. But anyway, this document is entitled NESARA History True Story. Underneath that, it says partial history of the true NESARA law. And then below that is a picture of what is represented to be, I assume, two farmers with the text farm claims. Now, this is quite an interesting document. It starts out with the farm claims and it goes through that history. And then on page 3, it talks about under positive law, it says laws that have been enacted by a properly instituted and recognized branch of government. Irrefutable proof was presented by a retired CIA agent. Okay, so I guess we can count on the CIA to tell the truth. In another paragraph below that, it says somehow within their ranks, a 4-star U.S. Army general received title and receiver of the original 1933 United States bankruptcy. Now, this 4-star Army general, of course, remains unnamed, so we don't know who that is. Now, further down on the next page, towards the bottom, it says the U.S. Supreme Court placed a gag order on the case, struck all information from the Federal Registry, and placed all records in the Supreme Court files. A settlement was agreed to out of court, and the decision was sealed by Janet Reno. Because the case was sealed, claimants are not allowed to share court documents to media outlets without violating the settlement, but they can tell others about the lawsuit. This is why you probably have not heard about this. Well, that seems to be a common theme. Okay, going down on the next page, they uncovered the common practices of bribery and extortion committed by both senators and judges. The criminal activity was so rampant that only 2 out of 535 members of Congress were deemed honest. Remember that number, 2 out of 535 members. It continues claiming that there was an audit of the Federal Reserve, and as a result of that audit, the military officers found $800 trillion sitting in accounts which should have been applied to the national debt. Then next we segue into the trading programs because it says these hidden trillions were then confiscated and placed into European bank accounts. Now, why weren't they placed in U.S. bank accounts? In order to generate the enormous funds needed to pay the farmers' claims class action lawsuit, later this money would become the basis of the prosperity programs, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Then, of course, we have the military confronting Bush in August 1992, demanding that he sign an agreement that would return the United States to constitutional law and ordered him never to use the term New World Order again. Do you believe that? Gosh, that pesky Bush. Bush pretended to cooperate, but secretly planned to bring about the New World Order anyway by signing an executive order on December 25th, Christmas, that would have indefinitely closed all banks, giving Bush an excuse to declare martial law. In the next paragraph, it says, thank God the military intervened and stopped Bush from signing that executive order. We don't know who in the military, we don't know how they did it, and when they did it. Okay, moving on to the next page, it goes through some background, I guess, with the IRS and the Supreme Court and military and Congress. And finally, about halfway down on page 6, it says, in agreement with the Supreme Court ruling on June 3rd, 1993, which I don't know what ruling they're talking about, Janet Reno ordered the Delta Force and Navy SEALs to Switzerland, England, and Israel to recapture trillions of dollars of gold stolen by the Federal Reserve System from the strategic gold reserves. Now, we don't have much detail on this as far as where they were, where the gold was. Was it in the banks? Was it in the ground? Was it in a cave? Who knows? Okay, so then the next paragraph goes through about stockpiling this gold at the NORAD complex at Colorado Springs and 4 other repositories. Janet Reno's actions so enraged the powers that be that it resulted in her death. She was then replaced with a clone, and it was this creature that was responsible for covering up the various Clinton scandals. Now, interestingly enough, it says this happened after June 1993, but if you remember, in February, from February to April of 1993 was when we had the Waco siege, and we know Janet Reno was behind that. And so I guess she was bad then she became good after June 3rd, and then they had to kill her and clone her so she could become bad again. So, this story is just unbelievable. Now, in the next paragraph, it says to keep the Secretary of U.S. Treasury, Robert Rubin, in line, he too was also cloned. And the last paragraph on page 6 says during this time, the U.S. Supreme Court assigned 1 or more justices to monitor the progress of the rulings. I guess they just came out of the blue and assigned an authority to the Supreme Court that they don't have. They enlisted help of experts in economics, monetary systems, banking, constitutional government, and law, and many other related areas. These justices built coalitions of support and assistance with thousands of people worldwide, known as the White Knights. The term White Knights was borrowed from the world of big business. It refers to a vulnerable company that is rescued by a corporation or a wealthy person from a hostile takeover. The next page, the first paragraph, second sentence, eventually they settled on certain agreements, also known as accords. Of course, we don't know what these are, but we'll have to take Mr. Rink's word for it. The second paragraph, in 1998, the military generals who originally participated in the farmers' claim process realized that the U.S. Supreme Court justices had no intentions of implementing the aforementioned accords that we don't know anything about. Then in 1999, a 75-page document known as the National Economic Security and Reformation Act was submitted to Congress, where it sat with little action for almost a year. We don't know who submitted this document. It was a document, not a law. So anyway, go down to the next paragraph. This is when it gets good. Now we're getting into spy novel stuff. Late one evening on March 9th, 2000, a written quorum call was hand-delivered by Delta Force and Navy SEALs to 15 members of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House who were sponsors and co-sponsors of NESARA. Okay, so now we find out where this 75-page document came from. They were immediately escorted by Delta Force and Navy SEALs to their respective voting chambers, where they passed the National Economic Security and Reformation Act. So we have 535 members of Congress in the Senate, and 15 members were able to pass a law. Okay? So if you believe that, well, anyway, so these 15 members of Congress were the only people lawfully allowed to hold office in accordance with the original 13th Amendment. Okay. So we have 15 members of Congress who passed a law all by themselves, and I don't think this has ever been done in the history of the country. And if you go check the congressional records, you probably won't find this law that was passed by this 15 members of Congress and the Senate. Okay, going on down now to page 8, underneath the 19 bullet points for what NESARA is. Because President Clinton's clone, so now we've got another clone, had no interest in signing NESARA into law on October 10th, 2000, under orders from U.S. military generals, the elite Navy SEALs and Delta Force stormed the White House and under gunpoint forced Bill Clinton to sign NESARA. During this time, Secret Service and White House security personnel were ordered to stand down, disarmed, and allowed to witness this event under a gag order. Now, you think that if the Navy SEALs and the Delta Force were able to storm the White House and take over, they would have just basically then restored the Republic. But instead, they, I guess, pulled a gun on Clinton, or, well, I'm sorry, on Clinton's clone, and made him sign the law that doesn't exist, or the law that we can't find in the congressional record. That was again passed by 15 members of Congress out of 535 members. Okay, I know it's hard to keep all this stuff straight. Okay, so the next paragraph here gives you an idea of why no one knows about this. From its very inception, Bush Sr., the corporate government, major bank houses, and the Carlyle Group have opposed NESARA. To maintain secrecy, the case details and the docket number were sealed and revised within the official Congressional Registry to reflect a commemorative coin, and then again it was revised even more recently, but no citations. This is why there are no public congressional records and why a search for this law will not yield the correct details until after the reformations are made public. Well, thanks for that explanation. I guess we can stop looking for this because it's all sealed and a big secret. Another paragraph down. Well, the next paragraph, let's go over that. You probably never heard of this. You probably never of this law. I think he meant never heard of this law due to an extremely strict gag order placed upon politicians, media personnel, and bank officers. Even though Alex Jones or Ron Paul will now not tell you about it, the law is still valid. Well, thanks for that explanation. Next paragraph, and members of Congress will not tell us any of this because they have been ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court justices to deny the existence of NESARA or face charges of treason punishable by death. When Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone was about to break the gag order, but before he could, his small passenger plane crashed, killing his wife, daughter, and himself. Okay, well, I'm glad we got an explanation for what happened to Paul Wellstone. Okay, going down on the next page, they're talking now about Wikipedia. Wikipedia gives you the history of CIA agent Harvey Barnard's NESARA law. Okay, so now we're calling Harvey Barnard a CIA agent. Is this not projection? If you look closely, this law stands for National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, which would have made reforms to the economy and replaced the income tax with a national sales tax. This law was rejected by Congress in the 1990s, but there is little mention of the National Economic Security and Reformation Act on Wikipedia or its ramifications. Okay, well then it's interesting that he calls this a law. This law stands for national. So is it a law or is it not a law? Was it enacted or was it not enacted? Well, he doesn't really say. Okay, so now we get into the kicker. Going down a few more paragraphs. In 2001, after much negotiation, the Supreme Court justices ordered the current Congress to pass resolutions approving NESARA. Well, I thought it was already approved. Why would the Supreme Court order another branch of government to take action? This took place on September 9th. Okay, 2001, 18 months after NESARA became law. Does that make any sense to anybody? On September 10th, 2001, George Bush Sr. moved into the White House to steer his son on how to block the announcement. The next day, on September 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Alan Greenspan was scheduled to announce the new U.S. Treasury Bank system, debt forgiveness for all U.S. citizens, and abolishment of the IRS as the first part of the public announcements of NESARA. And then we go down to the next paragraph. Just before the announcement at 9 a.m., Bush Sr. ordered the demolition of World Trade Center to stop the international banking computers on floors 1 and 2 in the North Tower from initiating the new U.S. Treasury bank system. Explosives in the World Trade Center were planted by both CIA and Mossad operatives and detonated remotely in Building 7, which was demolished later that day in order to cover up the crime. Okay, so I have a question here. Just before the announcement at 9 a.m., Bush then ordered the demolition of World Trade Center to stop the international banking computers on floors 1 and 2. So, anyway, I won't go into the ridiculousness of that statement. It should be apparent for all to see. As much as I'd like to, I could recap that for you, but I think you guys can read this document and you can see almost on every page and almost in every paragraph that there are allegations made about certain branches of government able to do certain things which are not in their authority to do. And let's keep in mind also that the government that we think is the government is in fact a corporation providing government services to the people, not an actual republic. So when you mix all those things together, this whole thing is quite unbelievable, to say the least. Now, I promised earlier that we'd talk about the one and only dove of oneness. So I'm going to just launch into that now for just a few minutes because it is an integral part to this whole NESARA story. The dove of oneness, I believe, was identified as Shayna Goodwin or Godwin, who has since passed. But she seemed to have taken up the mantle of pushing NESARA as a real thing. Maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s. Seems like a lot of people gave her money because she indicated that she needed funds to travel around the country and for other various things. And this ties right into Clyde Hood and the Omega Trust scam. Seems like Mr. Hood took approximately $20 million from hundreds, if not thousands, of investors all over the world, and he did this by telling them that if they sent him $100, he would send them back $510 in 275 days. Of course, you were supposed to send this $100 in cash, wrapped in aluminum foil, and sent through Federal Express because we couldn't chance it going through the U.S. Postal Service. Yes, and he and his cohorts, I don't know, 17 or 19 of them are eventually arrested, charged, and he was serving a 14-year prison sentence for money laundering and all kinds of things when he passed away in prison. So NESARA is responsible, the NESARA legend is responsible for thousands of investors losing $20 million collectively because Hood indicated, and as did the Dove of Oneness, that once NESARA became law, that all these people would get their money. And of course, that has not happened. And then there have been some other stories about prosperity programs, which are based on a subject I know very much about, and we've released copies of trading program contracts. So the prosperity programs were going to pay out once NESARA was announced and goes into effect. So I think to recap this, NESARA has been around, the legend of NESARA has been around for over 20 years. It has managed to take over $20 million from unsuspecting people who have believed the legend. And it seems now that it continues to be used as a story, a scam, a foundation for taking more money from unsuspecting people in the way of selling hopium, that this in fact will become law. Now, some other things that are connected with this is supposedly the St. Germain Trust is involved, and even Archangel Michael roams the halls of the Pentagon to make sure that this is going to be put into effect. And again, here we are 20 years later, and none of this has happened. So I'm going to wrap this up. I don't know what else there is to say about it other than do your homework, research it, look into it. But these people who are touting NESARA, there's either one of two things is going on. Either they are ignorant or they are being deceptive to get money. So take a look at it. And I will put this out to any of you people who are pushing NESARA. I would love to have uh, do a show with you, and you can come in and try to explain it to me. I'm still waiting for the evidence. So if you have this Supreme Court decision that everybody talks about, it must be the Rehnquist decision. If you have a copy of this law that was passed by 15 members of Congress and the Senate, I'd like to see it. If you have any information about this, that's evidence. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you on a live stream so that we can discuss all the merits of NESARA. So I'll be waiting. My email is paladin@whitehatsreport.com. I'm not hard to find, and let's do this. Let's get this information out there if it's real. If it's not, then I would urge all of you to stop selling the hopium that you've been offering and stop leading people astray with hopes of debt forgiveness and all kinds of things. And this is directly to you, Chuck, in Mexico. You have indicated at least once that you have had thousands of people send you proof that their mortgages have been forgiven. Well, I would make the same challenge to you or anyone out there who has had their mortgages forgiven as a result of NESARA. Please send me that information to my email, okay? And I think before I go, I can't resist recapping this James Rink article by the numbers, okay? So let's start. We've got 3 presidents. We've got Bush Sr., Clinton, and then Grant. We have 4 clones, an unnamed Army general, Janet Reno, Robert Rubin, and of course Bill Clinton. We have 15 members of the House and Senate who passed a law that none of us have seen or are aware of with proof. And I wonder if the 2 honest members of Congress identified by Mr. Rink in his dissertation were part of the 15 members of the House and Senate who actually did pass this law. Then we've got $20 million. That is the amount of money that was taken from investors all over the world by Clyde Hood. We have $100, and 100 was the amount of money that you could invest in a Federal Express package sent to Mr. Hood, and make sure you wrap that $100 in tinfoil. And then we have $5,100 that was going to be your return on the $100 in 275 days. I'm sure I've missed some things. I'm sure I haven't covered the whole story because there's other allegations and representations made about this. It seems like the story has grown legs, and it continues to grow legs, and more information is added to this core story that, like I say, I found that James Rink article from 2009. So now the good news. I know this is going to be about 30 minutes that you'll never get back. If Trump is reelected, he will finishing the dismantling of the Federal Reserve, which will then get rid of the IRS, and we'll have a restoration of the Republic. And some of these things that are included in the NESARA legend will become true, will become fact, will become reality. But it's not going to be based on some law that doesn't exist. It will be based on the restoration of the Republic. Okay, Paladin out.